There's one thing that Apple didn't say about the new M4 chips that they just announced. It has everything to do with what the M4 is replacing. So let me explain. I've been following Apple Silicon very closely since the original M1 came out in 2020. And there have been two major announcements since then. One was the M1X in 2021, which turned out to be the same chip as the M1 Pro and Max. And then this year we had the M2, which replaced the M1 in the MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro. But if we look at the Mac lineup today, we can see that there is still one model that hasn't yet been updated with newer, better Apple Silicon, and that's the iMac. When the M1 first came out, there were rumors that the iMac would be the next to get the new chip. And in fact, the M1 iMac was shown off at the 2021 spring event, but it never came out. The M1 Pro and Max were announced later that year, and we got an M1 Pro and Max iMac instead. And now, 3 years later, we finally got a replacement for the M1 iMac, which looks identical except for the color. But there's no M2 or M3 here. We are still on the M1. Now, it could be tempting to think of this as Apple skipping a generation. But I don't think that's the case, because Apple hasn't done that with any of their other products. They've always kept the same generation across all models. So I think it's more likely that the reason why we're still seeing the M1 here is because the M2 doesn't offer much more performance over the M1. Remember that the M1 was the first Apple Silicon chip, and it was designed from the ground up for Macs. It used a new manufacturing process, a new CPU and GPU architecture, and a whole new system on a chip concept that was radically different from Intel's older designs. And even though the M2 is a more modern chip with a smaller manufacturing process and a few more CPU and GPU cores, it really isn't that different from the M1. It's not like the M1 is old or slow by today's standards. In fact, it's still faster than the latest Intel chips that Apple was using before the transition. What's really changed is how good newer Apple Silicon chips have gotten. Just look at the difference between the M1 and the M3. That is a much bigger improvement than going from the M1 to the M2. And so if you're going to put an M2 in something like the iMac, which is a low-end model, well, you kind of have to ask yourself if it's worth spending more money on a chip that only delivers incremental improvements. It's sort of like if Toyota made a new Corolla that was 5% faster. Would they bother to make a new model with that chip? Probably not. They would probably just keep selling the old one. And that's exactly what's happening here. Apple is keeping the M1 around because it's still pretty good. Now, I know some people might be disappointed that they don't have the latest M4 chip in the new iMac. But I actually think it makes sense for this model. The M1 is still a very capable chip, and the people who buy the iMac aren't exactly buying it for its raw performance. In fact, if you look at the base model that starts at $1,300, it comes with an 8-core CPU, which is more than enough for most tasks. If you want more cores, you have to go to the Pro models anyway. So I think this is fine. The only thing I wish Apple would do is lower the price of the M1 iMac. It's still selling for $1,300, which is way too much for what it is. But I'm guessing they'll keep it at that until the M2 version comes out. This is your host. Thanks for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next video.